morning consult poll shows a slip for Elizabeth Warren, and meanwhile, Tom Steyer is surging.
Weird things are happening. So joining us now is Team Rising. He's Democratic strategist Michael Starr-Hopkins and Marshall Kosloff. He's a media analyst. So, okay, two great friends of the show.
Indeed.
We've got our favorite poll, Morning Consult. So we've basically, look, Joe Biden is at 25%, Bernie Sanders at 20%.
The early primary states, by the way.
This is the early primary states. Pete Buttigieg at 13, Elizabeth Warren at 12. Michael, she's fallen to 4th in the early primary states. It's a far cry from, what is it, just a couple weeks ago.
6-point drop in 1 week.
In a single week. Should note that the plus or minus 4% margin of error here, but it still puts her at least in 3rd or 4th. I mean, it's a terrible place to be.
I mean, what this tells you is that this race is wide open. Everybody's kind of looking at candidates, letting them go up, letting them go down, giving other candidates a shot. And so I think what we're seeing is people are liking Elizabeth Warren, but aren't really believing that she can beat Trump in the general.
But I think there's one specific group of people that is unsettled, and that is affluent white liberals who have given a look to Beto, gave a look to Kamala, gave a look to Pete early on, and then Warren, and now back to Pete. You know, the working class coalitions of Biden and of Bernie have been fairly stable. It's that one group that's been sort of searching around for their candidate.
Yeah, and I think you put it exactly the way that it is, which is that Bernie and Biden have their really stable bases. Like, they'll have moments where they'll go up and go down a little bit, but everyone sort of had this attempt to compete in those areas. And I think Elizabeth Warren had her chance. I think there were a couple instances where I think that audience found her lacking, especially if you look at what happened with Medicare for All and her plan there. But it's going to be difficult.
And that's the interesting thing. I looked at the percent support, right? So like 75% or whatever Bernie supporters are like totally with him, totally decided. I think the number for Biden is a little bit softer.
It was like 60. Yeah.
But for Warren, I mean, it's like 30%, right? So like that really is, and I think Pete Buttigieg as well. I think it might be in the 20s, and that's where Tom Steyer voters are. That's where Kamala Harris voters are.
Where are Tom Steyer voters? That's a separate question. Hold that thought.
Let's hold that one because that's a whole other. That's a psychology experiment. But I mean, that is the real issue that you have there, Michael, which is that she's trying to like basically put a foot astride both, the center lane and the progressive lane, and it doesn't seem like either is working for her. I think the question right now is whether Buttigieg can keep this up in the early states, but so much of it is driven by media coverage that if he has a single slip, I think it's gone.
Well, and also, I mean, he's got a really great ground game in Iowa.
He does.
But it's going to be interesting to see how that translates later on, because Iowa, being a very white state, isn't representative of the country. And so while he may do well in Iowa, it's going to be really hard in places like Nevada and South Carolina to see that translate. And I think you're seeing that with Warren as well. She's doing well in Iowa, but how is she going to do with African American voters?
She's like 10%.
Right. And
so it's not particularly good.
What do you attribute, Michael, her sort of fall to? Because it's not just this one poll. I mean, we were looking at Nate Silver's average has her down 5 points over the last 3 weeks. I mean, it's been a consistent fall for the first time in a while. Bernie Sanders a couple weeks ago overtook her for second place again. What do you attribute that fall to?
So I think it's a combination of policy. So I think people are worried about how she's going to pay for things. I think her support of Medicare for All is something that really scared away a lot of voters once they found out that Medicare for All would strip away private insurance. And I think
her voters in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that really it becomes electability. I think this is a different election than other elections.
But when she fell is when she walked away from Medicare for All. It's when she equivocated on it that was the problem.
And that goes to the point, which is that she's trying to straddle this position where she can't be as left as Bernie is for a couple of reasons. He's really sort of solidified his support there. But she also can't be as to the center as Joe Biden is. So whenever she's going to have those positions, that's why actually Medicare for All was a terrible debate issue for her, because it was the one policy issue where every single one of her sort of precarious positions and coalitions was sort of up for grabs. So.
I mean, Medicare
we just don't want to engage on it.
Medicare for All has been a terrible issue for almost every candidate
except for Bernie Sanders. And for Joe Biden. I mean, this is what Crystal talks about, which is Joe Biden is like, no, I'm against it. Not flat out like, I'm not for it. I'm for a public option and expanding the ACA. About half the Democratic electorate is like, hey, that's for me. That's what I want.
Those are the two. And Bernie is most trusted on healthcare, but Biden is right behind him at number 2 because even though I think he's wrong, he's clear. And you believe that this is what he will actually do, and there's a case to be made for it.
And he's been associated with Obamacare, something that, while it was unpopular when it was first implemented, people have gotten used to it, and it's a known commodity.
Okay, I do want to talk about Tom Steyer, though, because this is just perplexing. Look, It's 9%. But I mean, it's one poll. Let's put that out there. He spent a lot of money in these early primary states, I think especially in Iowa. He had this next gen organization with a big list, et cetera. But he was the impeached guy. Now he's sort of moved to be the climate change guy, even though he owns coal and like gas industry stock, and he like made his money in coal mines, and now he's a climate change guy. I don't understand it, but apparently somebody.
I mean, 9%. He's fifth in polls.
Somebody's nipping at Elizabeth Warren's heels. Yeah. What is going on here?
Everyone's getting a shot this time. I mean, I think that really, if you have some sort of plausible story to tell, I think the polls over the past year have shown that you will get some set of voters who are interested in you. Also, to the point, like he spent a lot of money on this race, so it's not as if he sort of is walking out there organically, and there's this huge Steyer surge of people.
I mean, at one point, Ben Carson was the front runner.
That's true.
In the Republican race.
Yeah,
so,
but
these things happen.
The thing is with this is that I just think it goes much more to show just how soft the support for everybody but the top two candidates are.
But I think Biden's support is even softer than what people realize.
But they're like him. 60% like him. I mean, they're totally with him, right? Seriously, African American vote. I was looking at this earlier. He's in a bad place in the early states of Iowa and New Hampshire. He's at +9 in Nevada, +19 in South Carolina.
But once that starts,
is, I mean,
once that fractures, it's gonna.
Will it fracture?
I don't think it will. What would cause it to fracture? Because I mean, the guy's been terrible in every debate. He said all kinds of impolitic things. He's like offended people. He said he's in the wrong state. He doesn't look like he's ready for prime time. His teeth almost fell out of his mouth at one of the debates. I'm not sure if you mean here, but that's the thing that actually happened. And it doesn't seem to really matter.
His base doesn't care. I mean, and you said it earlier, right? Like he's staked out. The one thing he has done is have very straightforward positions of, hey, Obama was pretty great. We enjoyed those 8 years of his presidency. He has the support of black voters. Like it's going to stay that way. Those voters don't care about the gaffes. I think that's a very online, very Twitter thing that I think people in D.C. care about. But it's not like
I think African Americans could potentially pivot away if they can find a candidate that they think can beat Trump and doesn't have the vulnerabilities of Biden.
Possible.
And what do you think are the vulnerabilities of Biden?
I think he's gaffe prone. I think when you're going up against Trump, people are really going to be worried about what it's going to look like on the stage. Can he stand there and debate with Trump? Is he going to actually be able to?
I mean, I do think that's if the electability sense starts to crack. But I think Marshall's right that, look, you basically got Biden, and I talked about this in my monologue today. Biden has this very clear case. Like, Trump was an aberration. Let's just get this guy out, and let's get back to, smooth and steady and doing the thing that we were doing. And there's a significant portion of the population, especially older folks who are more risk averse, who say, you know what, that sounds okay. I was doing okay. I was living. Let's go back to that. And then you have another very clear case for Bernie Sanders, which is no. This was a mess. This was a disaster. The past 30 years, we got to do something totally new. And you have a coalition, mostly younger folks, who see it that way. And I think it's very unlikely that either of those bases really crack.
And here's the key thing here. I don't think people are looking at gaffes. I think they're looking at trust. And I think the key story that we have both with Bernie and Joe Biden is trust. I think everyone trusts that Joe Biden will try to take us back to the Obama years. For good or for ill, whether you liked his presidency or you didn't, people know that Joe Biden will bring us back to some form of normalcy. People know that Bernie Sanders will do that. You know what? Mayor Pete, he definitely will not have gaffes on stage. He will be the most charismatic, the most eloquent person you've ever seen.
I don't know about charismatic.
Well, to a certain segment of our society finds it very earnest and charismatic. Boomers. But in all seriousness, but guess what? They don't trust him though. They do not trust him, and they prioritize trust over eloquence.
What do you think, Michael?
Many of the things that Biden is strong with is exactly the case that Bloomberg is now going to make, that he is the one who can actually take on Trump. He's the one who actually can bring together that coalition.
Right? That's the thing.
They don't yet, but I mean, you saw in South Carolina that the mayor of Columbus is now the co-chair of.
Well, we covered that on the show, and that's because he's gotten a lot of money from a Bloomberg charity.
But it's actually interesting, the case you're making. So you think that Bloomberg, I mean, he's campaigning today, and we're going to get into this in the next block, so let's not go too far. But he's campaigning today in Mississippi. You think he could win over black voters?
I do. I mean, I look at, and it's always easy to talk about, personal stories, but my grandmother called me the other day after seeing a bunch of Bloomberg ads, and she's been worried about Biden. She's been supporting him and saying the media has been beating up on him, but she said that now she's looking at Bloomberg because she thinks he can actually beat Trump and has kind of the record and the money that can be spent.
All right,
we found a Bloomberg supporter.
There we go.
Hold that thought. We're going to talk more about Bloomberg and more polls right after this.